Hello and welcome to this new edition of the Foojay Podcast. Today we are traveling to the US where we visit the Atlanta JUG and the DevNexus conference.
Welcome to the Foojay Podcast, all your news about OpenJDK.
The Foojay Podcast Java User Group World Tour already brought us to the UK, US, Dubai and Japan. Today we travel back to the US to learn more about the Atlanta JUG, especially because this week they organized the DevNexus conference. Let's learn about the challenges of organizing both a Java user group and a full conference.
Hello, my name is Pratik Patel. I am a Java champion based out of Atlanta, and I am currently the president of the Atlanta Java user group. And I am also the conference co-chair along with Vincent for the DevNexus conference. And I also work at Azul Systems leading the developer advocate team.
All right, everybody. My name is Vincent Mayers. I'm also a Java champion based out of Atlanta. Not from Atlanta, but based. Well, I don't sound like I'm from Atlanta. I am living in Atlanta and have been for 20 years. So I do co-chair the DevNexus conference with Pratik. I'm the treasurer of the Atlanta Java user group, and I am the director of community for Gradle.
And I'm Frank. I work as a technical writer for Azul and also make these podcasts for Foojay because I'm very interested in how it is to organize a Java user group and what is involved and why people actually do this. Let's go back in history. The Atlanta JUG, how long does it already exist?
The Atlanta JUG is actually one of the oldest Java user groups in the world. Vincent, do you remember who started the JUG? It wasn't Burr Sutter. Burr Sutter, who's at Red Hat now, ran the JUG for a very long time. And then after that, there was someone else. And then after that, it was me. There's always a board, of course. But Vince, do you remember who it was that started the JUG back in the early 2000s?
I never met that person. I first got into that orbit in 2004. And I think Burr had run it for about, I want to say 6 years. The guy that kicked it off, though, I don't even know who it was. But it's safe to say that the JUG has been going for at least 25 years, probably 26 or 27.
Yeah, at least 25 years.
Almost as old as Java itself?
Yep, that's right.
Which came first, the language or the JUG?
I think the oldest Java user group in the US, at least, is the New York Java SIG run by our friend Frank Greco. I think it predates the Atlanta JUG by 1 or 2 years. I think he started his JUG in 1996 or so. So there you go.
So an important distinction, we are actually Java users, not S groups, not Java user groups. And Java users groups came out of SIGs, special interest groups. Community lane here.
Community lane.
Going back in time, yeah. So you were not there from the start, but why did you get involved in the organization of the JUG?
Well, I was at the time I was a technical recruiter. I'm not a software engineer, but I play one on TV, as I like to say. I'm actually not a Java developer. I have a degree in pottery. It's a long story, so I'm not going to go into it here. But I was a tech recruiter. I had my own company in Atlanta, and I got involved with the JUG as a sponsor in 2004 because I thought it'd be a great way to learn more about the ecosystem and the community. And I've, in a nutshell, just stayed involved ever since.
And for you, Pratik?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So I had actually just moved back to the US from London in early of 2005. As I was working as a Java developer and architect here, I wanted to start getting involved a little bit in the community here. And I remember, I think I did my first presentation at the Atlanta JUG. I became a member immediately upon moving here in 2005, but I think I did my first presentation sometime in 2007 at the Atlanta Java user group. And it was a presentation on Groovy and Grails, believe it or not. So you probably remember that, Frank. I think some people still use that technology, but back then it was kind of gaining traction because of all that movement around the Ruby on Rails community. So Groovy and Rails was starting to get some lift and some developer mindshare at the time, right?
With all the JUGs had a lot of issues with COVID and actually everyone stopped or went online. How did you continue your sessions or did you have to stop?
So I've been involved since 2004. We have not missed a single session in the
Wow.
entire time that I've been involved. Yes, we did go online. There was this kind of initial excitement of, well, we were forced to go online, of course, and there was this initial, oh, we can do this on Zoom. Of course, that wore off pretty quickly, but we continued to do it, and it worked out well. It was a way to keep continuity. I'm sure we'll get into that. Running a jug is all about consistency. But yes, we went online and kept going all the way through pandemic years. And now we're back in person.
And that went smooth because I heard from the Denver Jug, for instance, they have a bit an issue of finding venues where they're welcome with a big group because of, still COVID being around and extra safety measures that need to be taken. That went smooth for you to restart?
The way that the Atlanta Jug has always done the meetings, as far as I remember, is that we always book our meetings not at a company's office, but at co-working space or, hotel meeting room or something like that. So we didn't have some of the obstacles that some other Java user groups did, where, they would meet at like this company's office, right, every month, and then that company shut down their office, and now there are additional barriers and blah, blah, blah to opening back up. So we never had that problem. So when we were starting to decide on having in-person meetings again, kind of as the pandemic wore on, we just booked our normal venue with a smaller room. And we just started to go from there, basically. Right?
How do you do this? Because most of the jugs, they're totally free. They have no budget. So they really rely on these companies who offer this space. If you say, we rent a space at a hotel, I can imagine that there is some budget needed there.
Even from the early days, it's the jug has had sponsors. When I started to get involved with my company, we were like one of 3 sponsors. The first being, primarily one being JBoss, because Burr Sutter worked for JBoss, and of course JBoss was a big part of the ecosystem. Yeah, so there was JBoss. There was I should go to the Wayback Machine and look. There was another consulting company, and there was Anteo Group, my company. So, there were annual sponsorship dues at the time, and so the jug has always had a little bit of money every year, and use that to pay for the space.
So one of the goals from the beginning with the Atlanta Jug has always been long-term sustainability and independence. We got people from the community, like when Vincent was working at a recruitment company, they would sponsor with money, and other people would sponsor, so that we were able to have the ability to be 100% independent and not necessarily tied to a specific company. And, whatever was going on there, someone who was our champion at that company would leave, and then all of a sudden we have to figure stuff out again, right? So Vince actually does a presentation called the Jug Business. In that presentation, he talks about how, you can run it as just kind of like, how you would just loosely run some kind of meetup like this. But, if you want to be more serious about it and have the ability to have more independence and to do more, then running it like a business is probably a good idea. So, for example, we many years ago set up the Atlanta Java User Group as a U.S. nonprofit, specifically a 501c6 company, which is known as a professional organization nonprofit, so that we would have, the various tax benefits and the ability to say, hey, look, we're 100% nonprofit. We do this for the community. And that's why, you should get involved either as a volunteer or a speaker or as a sponsor or whatever.
This is actually the first jug I'm talking to who has this complete formal structure. That's really great. I can imagine that's also a lot of extra effort that needs to be put in there. So you need to find your sponsors. You have this accountancy to be done.
Absolutely. There's definitely more work to it. And there are some other jugs. Vince, do you know the other ones off the top of your head who are also registered as a company? I think Frank's New York Java SIG, for example, is registered as a company. And the Chicago Jug actually is also registered as a nonprofit in the state of Illinois, if I remember correctly. So we're not the only ones.
I think the Dublin Jug is also a registered company. Frank, you're right. It is more work. And but it does allow us to be, consistent. And Pratik mentioned his talk. The overriding theme is about consistency, intentional consistency. Trust me, consistency is hard. It's really hard, especially when everyone's a volunteer, because things change in people's lives and blah blah blah, and circumstances change, and it's super super hard to even what is a jug? It's a meeting once a month. Well, a lot goes into that. It doesn't just happen by magic, and for it to happen consistently takes a lot more magic, if you will.
And I can imagine that there are more people involved than both of you. So you're here now as the presenter of the Atlanta JUG, but I guess that there is a whole team supporting you to organize these.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a board, and we have a fairly, I think a fairly large board in terms of how, most jugs are organized. I'm trying to remember exactly how many people we have on the board because, we have some people move in and out here or there. Currently, we have, for example, another Java champion who's on the board. Burke Huffnagel is part of our organizing team. And then there's Glenn Renfro, who works on open source Spring, but he works for VMware. Laura Moore, another local person, Najay Stevenson, and Roy Clarkson. We've had a couple of people cycle out recently, but you know how it is. The people kind of have time and don't have time. But we have a great board that helps us to put on a really good Java user group, and of course DevNexus.
And organizationally, there's other things that because we are a registered nonprofit, we and of course now I'm sure we'll get to the DevNexus conference. We run this event, and there's a lot goes into that. We have to have a CPA and do our IRS reporting every year. Part of that is we need to have reporting on what the board does and how many hours we work every year for the JUG as volunteers. And we have a board charter. We have regular board meetings once a quarter, one of which is designated as the annual general meeting. We take minutes every month. So yes, there's so much that has to happen if you want to do this at the. I say scale not because we're this super huge JUG with all these people that show up every month, because everyone's still building into that, but because we do these other things as well, which does require scale. So in order to do that successfully and consistently, we have to have all these other organizational factors to what we do.
I've seen some big numbers on the number of speakers that you have for DevNexus. That's immense, and the number of sessions, but we'll come to that. But if you have a JUG, how many visitors do you have for the JUG in average?
Before the pandemic, we would average anywhere from 100 to 200 JUG members in attendance. Since the pandemic, I think when we had Venkat here and Josh Long here in December and January, we had about 50 to 70 people at both those meetups. So JUGs are very much recovering, from the pandemic and, all that stuff. We've seen a definite uptick month over month since we started JUG meetings back in, when did we start, Vince? Back up in August or something?
We started in person around the summer of last year. Yeah. Right. Summer of 2022.
Slowly been building up. That's right.
Yep. So. But even 50, 70 people is a lot for some JUGs. So, yeah.
Especially for Atlanta, because Atlanta is geographically very spread out. So unlike, cities in Europe, for example, where people come to a city center to work and then they go home, Atlanta is not really like that. I like to think of Atlanta as having 4 or 5 different city centers where people go to work. So it's very geographically spread out. And that's part of the challenge in this, after pandemic world, is that people are much more working at home. So it's more difficult for people to consider leaving their house to drive 30 minutes or even an hour to go to a JUG meeting. So that's where some of the challenge comes in.
You have so many sessions, so many histories. So is there one session that you can pick out which was the most remarkable? Either a very good session or a very bad session?
I can't say, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I actually wasn't at this one, but there was one, I think, sometime in the fall where didn't that person that we had to call an ambulance, right? Wow. Were you there, Pratik, for that session?
I was there, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the worst one. I think the best ones, in my opinion, is Venkat Subramaniam. I think everybody knows who he is. He comes and visits our JUG every December, right before Christmas. So we always just book him, like we have him booked out 5 years in advance, right? So we like just come every Christmas, whenever that third Tuesday is. Those are the favorites, one of the favorites every year for our attendees and for me personally, because having Venkat there and having his energy and his positivity, and of course his immense knowledge in the universe we work in, is always a lot of fun. And the format that we typically do that is we do a ask me anything type of thing where someone like me or one of the other Atlanta Jug board members will moderate. People ask questions like, what do you think about Java 19 or this or that, and those are, for me, those are the most fun ones where people are very interactive rather than just having a lecture style presentation.
There was one session we did with James Gosling, believe it or not, and he came. Oh God, this may have been around 2008, 7, something like that, maybe 6. I don't know. And we did an AMA with Gosling, and it was at a movie theater, a departure from our normal meeting space. And AMA with Gosling, and then we all get to watch a movie. But so I recall one of the questions somebody asked was, tell me about the last aha moment you had in technology. And expecting James to talk about when they conceived the Java in a group and called it Oak Tree or whatever on earth it was.
Oak.
Initially.
Yep.
Oak, yeah, Oak, back in the 1820s, and he said, there was a Fortran utility in 1964 that really got me going and interested, and it was just super funny.
Let me add one more thing. We've been talking quite a bit about, setting up a company and running it more formally and stuff like that. But I wanted to make it very clear to the audience of this podcast that you don't have to do that. There doesn't have to be that much ceremony, as our friend Venkat would say. You don't have to have that much organization. I think is perfectly fine. So, for example, if you work in a city and you work for a company that has a 10 or 20 or 30% office space, that's a great way to get started or to drive your jug initially, right? You don't have to be formal. You can ask your company to provide pizza, or you can ask a couple of friends locally who work at a recruitment shop, for example, to provide some food for the meetup and just get started, right? I think the important thing is that you create the community rather than having this big organization around it, right? Yeah, sure. After a while, you may say, you know what, this is going really well. Let's create a proper company around this and let's get formal sponsorships and stuff like that. But especially if you live in a city which is, small to medium sized or even large sized for that matter, there's nothing stopping you from just saying, hey, let's just meet at my company's office on Tuesday evening from 5 to 7. We'll get some speakers and stuff like that. And, the next question might be, well, how do I get speakers? The obvious answer is just reach out into your local JUG community or the friends that you have in your JUG community, Java community locally, and get them to present on something. And then you can also reach out to people like us at the Atlanta JUG. We help our other JUG organizer friends in the US to get speakers. They'll say, hey, we just saw that you had Josh Long speak at your meetup. Do you think he'd like to come down to Greensboro, North Carolina? We're starting a new Java user group there. And we'll say, absolutely, we'll help you make that connection. And if he's available, he'll come speak, right? So you can always reach out to your fellow JUG organizers. And I think, Frank, you probably know this. There's actually a mail list for JUG leaders that you can sign up for once you've started a JUG, and you can get some support and help on all the different things that we've been talking about there.
You're right that it doesn't have to be so official. We just restarted the Belgian JUG, Tom Coles and me, and indeed we are just trying out. We'll see where we end up. But indeed, if you find a company who is willing to host you, it's definitely not difficult to find a speaker. What we also learned is that keep an eye on conferences in the neighboring countries, and people traveling to that conference or traveling back are most of the times available for a JUG.
Right. And when Frank says country, in the US, he means neighboring state.
Yes, I'm from Europe.
Yeah, the community is very helpful and engaged. So it could even be that you go to a conference website and you see someone who's speaking that's attributed to being an expert in a whatever tool framework language, and because other languages run on the JVM other than Java. It doesn't have to be about Java the language. It's about Java the ecosystem, right? And a lot of that is cloud native these days. So there's many things other than just let's talk about programming in Java, and just you can reach out to these folks on LinkedIn or over Twitter. They're super helpful, and if they you build a relationship, you build a rapport. If they can come, they'll come. They could also recommend other people because these speakers all tend to know each other from having done speaking stuff for some years, and everyone is very, very helpful. It's one of the most, to me, engaging things about the Java community is how eager to help other people in the community are.
Yeah, fully agree. This whole Java community is so friendly and so open. And when I was writing a book a few years ago, I was reaching out to some people who are my heroes, and they actually replied and they said, "Oh yeah, an interview, no problem. Just send me your questions." So indeed, a lot of these people are just so reachable and so open to help you and to assist you. We mentioned DevNexus already a few times, so we definitely need to talk about it. What is DevNexus? A little conference, something like that?
Yeah, so DevNexus is now the largest Java event in the US, probably North America. It was started many years ago. I think, Vincent, this year will be our 18th or 19th edition in some form of this conference. Is that right?
Yeah, so 18th year that the Atlanta Java User Group has run something. A quick history lesson. So in 2004 it was the first one. 2004. Look, my math's off. I don't know. So Burr Sutter wanted to run something, and it was a one-day single-track event called Java DevCon, and friends and family speaking. I think there might have been 50 people there. I think it was like $50 or $30 to get to go, just to cover the sandwiches or something that he probably made at home. And every year it built a little and a little, and then Sun took it over in I believe 06, 07 or 07, 08. And it folded into the Sun Tech Days Roadshow, where they would go around with a big semi truck of Sun stuff. And we would get James Gosling and Doris Chen and other people from Sun to come in and talk on Java and other speakers. And then when Sun got acquired by Oracle, that was the first real DevNexus that following year, where we're like, well, no more Sun Tech Days, but we still want to run something. Let's do something. Now there's a bigger audience. And really that was the first iteration of the name DevNexus. And we ran it at a venue in Atlanta called the Cobb Galleria, where it stayed for a number of years. I think there were maybe 400 people at the first one, like it's probably 4 tracks or something. Now it's a larger event. Our goal's never been to have, hey, let's have the biggest thing and have thousands of people, although it's kind of grown organically towards that. Our goal's just always been to put it on, just because we should. But to Pratik's point now, it's the longest running Java conference in the US. And, Sun Tech Days has come and gone, Java 1 has come and gone, or whatever Oracle did has come and gone. So, it's stood the test of time. I think 2020, we did it right before the pandemic in February. We didn't have a pandemic then, or there was rumblings of COVID. And we had about 2,500 people at that one. We did it virtually in 21. We did it in person in 2020, last year in 22, with about half the number at about 1,300. And here we are in 2023.
The conference really grew from the Atlanta JUG. So that was really the start, and then the conference came out of that one.
Yeah, and like Vincent was saying, there's been a couple of different names over the years, but I think it was probably 7 years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago, Vince and I were talking about the event, and we put together a goal of basically having the event get larger and larger over time. Because if you remember, Frank, Java 1 was also in play at the time, and Java 1 would be in the fall. And we're like, it would be really nice if we could have a great conference that would rival Java 1 in size in the spring. So we put together a plan to expand the number of tracks that we had. I think when we did it, the conference in 2017, I think we had 5 or 6 tracks. And when we did the show before the pandemic in 2020, We had a whopping 15 tracks for the event. So our goal was to have a big tent style of conference where we would have lots of different people in the Java ecosystem. At the time, cloud was big, and there were lots of other things. So we're happy to incorporate the things that developers are interested in at that given point in time. So right now, a lot of it is around, cloud and Java and DevOps and Java. And then, of course, we have tracks on like agile and practices and tools and stuff like that. But the idea is that we have this massive umbrella event where anyone who works in the development, specifically the Java development ecosystem, whether you're a project manager, a software architect, a developer, you're doing DevOps or you're doing cloud ops or whatever, a whole team could come to an event like this and they can get something out of it, right? They can get something. And when we look at the presentations which are submitted for the conference, one of the things that we look at from that specific point of view is we try to carry presentations where someone can go to a presentation and then the next day they can go to work and say, you know what, I saw this great presentation on this specific thing. I'm going to go try that because I think it's really useful for me or my team or my organization, and it will really help me personally from the career, and it'll help my company get value or whatever it may be, right? So we try to go things which are pragmatic and real world. We still carry all the stuff that, all the shiny new toys, as they say, that developers are interested in, right? But maybe they're not going to use today. So we still carry all that stuff just so that we have a well-rounded program. But our focus is very much on having things which people can use as soon as they've left the conference, right? Whether it's tomorrow, a month from now, or a year from now.
I think the biggest problem for your visitors is choosing which sessions they will follow.
That's right. You have to choose very carefully. We do record the conference so that folks can watch some of the sessions that they see. But just to give you an example, we always have some of our presenters complain that they're up against other people who have also amazing presentations. So, for example, one of the time slots that we have for this year's event, there's like 4 Java champions presenting in the same time slot. So, for example, Venkat is doing a presentation on Java 20. Daniel Hinojosa, who's a Java champion out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, is talking about machine learning with Kafka and TensorFlow. And then Bert, who you know from NLJUG, mastering the Linux command line. And then, of course, there's Josh Long talking about Spring Boot 3. Oh, and there's 8 other presentations in that same time slot. So you have to choose carefully is the good way to put it.
But I guess that if some room is completely full, people have to flow over to another room. We had a bit the same thing we have in Belgium, FOSDEM, with a lot of different rooms. It's in a university, so the rooms are not that big. And actually you end up in another room because the one that you wanted to visit was full. And you actually learn something new because you end up in a room that you were not expecting, and it's a new topic.
What you just said is the reason why people should go to a Java user group or by extension, a conference like this. So, for example, you may want to go to Josh Long's presentation on Spring Boot 3 because your company might be migrating to that. Well, this is really interesting. I could learn something, but the room's full. And then you end up in this presentation on Kafka. Okay. And this is interesting to you. You're not using it, not part of your stack or whatever. Or, conversely, you go to the JUG meeting that month and there's a presentation on Kafka. Some months later, you may be in an interview for a new job. And Kafka is not part of the stack or anything. And the interviewer says to you, do you know anything about Kafka? We're thinking about using this in our dev environment. And you say, well, no, I've never used it, but I did go to a presentation at conference this or JUG that, where the presenter was talking about streaming and how this can be used to do X, Y, and Z, and it seemed really interesting. And just the fact that you have a perspective on it because you'd seen a presentation and maybe even talked to the presenter after could make the difference between you getting hired and the other candidate, who might even have more skills in the particular stack that that you're interviewing for, but you have a perspective based on having seen someone in person and had some discussions after with someone else who was there. Again, that can make the difference between you getting hired for that role.
Yeah, that's something I learned at DevOps in September, or was it October last year, is people coming to me at the booth of Azul that I was at that time, telling, yeah, I'm doing Java development for so many years, and it's only now that I learned about streams, and because at our company we are stuck at Java 8 or whatever. Indeed, going to a conference and visiting a session that you didn't plan or can open so many eyes and give you so many new insights. That's really, really important.
The insights thing is important. All right, so you go to this talk on Spring or Kafka or anything else, but the conversations that happened over coffee and lunch, or even with the person next to you, about your real world use case, or that person may not have solved that themselves at their company or in the past, but they have a perspective on it which you hadn't thought of. Just that conversation could change your life, because you could have this real aha moment from some random conversation about something that helps you at work. And that in and of itself, it could be more valuable than any of the sessions on the new features of X, Y, and Z that you attended.
Yeah, and I think to build upon that, one of the things that I suggest to people who are junior and mid-level devs, or even senior devs for that matter, Frank, is I say, look, you can go to this session on what's the latest thing in Java 20. You're a experienced Java developer, and I'm sure you get some value out of it, right? But have you thought about going to something that might be a little bit different, right? So, for example, at this year's DevNexus, Aaron Schnabel from Red Hat is giving a presentation on Beyond REST and CRUD integration patterns and microservices, right? It's like, I know from the surface, it's like, well, I don't know if that's something I'll really get some value out of. But if you go to something like that, the probability that you'll learn something new, or even if you don't have something that you can use at work, you'll learn to think differently. It will help you in approaching any kind of system you're building, or even low-level code or something like that. So it's a lot of it. This is around expanding the way that you think as a software developer, because you know how it is as a software dev. You kind of, okay, I'm writing Java code, and this is how we write Java code, and this is how I've always written Java code. But what if I could build a system differently, right? What can I do to help myself and my team and my company build something in a new and modern way, and learn how to do that from an expert in the room? So
yeah, and just you bringing that up at a stand-up or something, or at a team meeting, because your company's thinking of trying something new. The boss goes, "Well, that's a great idea. Okay, we'll look into it." And then now you're running that project, and you're like, "Really?" And all of a sudden, you're now, after 6 months, on the road to becoming the expert at that org in whatever that is.
Do you have any idea how many speakers you have at DevNexus? I started counting the page, but I gave up.
So at DevNexus this year, there'll be a total of, including workshop speakers and some presentations which have 2 speakers, there'll be 139 total speakers across 120 sessions and 6 workshops.
Wow.
So there's 120 sessions, 12 tracks over 2 days. So yes, 120 sessions over 2 days, and then a full workshop day. So it's a big event.
I have to pick one. I saw you tweet about the keynotes, and I want to highlight Sean Phillips.
Yes.
I interviewed him for an article on Foojay about his project, and that's the project he will talk about, the visualization of brain-computer interfaces. He does it with Java Vix. That's one of my big loves, so that's why I wanted to interview him. It's really pity that I cannot join your conference. I really want to see him talk about this. He's such a good speaker.
We're really looking forward to this presentation. When we first started talking to him about this, obviously after we got the jokes of like, when can I plug into the matrix, right? When are you going to make this happen for us? Aside from those jokes, we really like the work that he was doing in this area. So, he's obviously an expert because he works doing this stuff, working with scientists who plug your brain into a computer type of thing. So we're super excited about carrying something for our audience that would, but it's one of those things. It's at the forefront of technology. It seems like, a distant Star Trek type of thing, but it may actually be here in the next,
Mhm.
decade or so. So it's super interesting for him to talk about how can humans directly plug into a computer, or how can a computer read your mind? Because, I would love to be able to not have to type anymore and just think words and they just show up on a screen, so.
The lazy programmer becoming even more lazy,
Yes, you
and
just you just think it and it happens. You don't even
it
have to type
happens.
anymore, right?
Can you think your tests? Can you think yourself your way out of flaky tests?
Maybe.
One day, one day.
Sean's always been great at this. So we had him as a keynote. I think it was 2017. Keeping honest, Pratik,
Yeah, that's right.
with Diane Davis, and they were both working at a NASA contractor at the time. And I can't remember the exact name of the session, but they're basically visualizing flight paths for orbital trajectories, and
Mhm.
he was able to show how they did this using JFX, and it was incredible.
And I know that he has this matrix-like displays. He has those displays in his lab, eh? So
That's right. Yeah. No, but for that presentation that they did back in 2017, it was around coming up with trajectories for mid-orbit between the Earth and the Moon for preparation for a permanent lunar base, right? So, as software developers, we're all some level, some degree of nerd, right? Whether it's space nerd or something else. And it was fascinating that there are actually people working on these big problems, like how do we establish a colony on the moon, right? What do we need to get there? Yeah, one of the things we need this thing running mid orbit between the Earth and the Moon as a halfway station. And so they were using Java effects to map out these trajectories, and Diane would come up with the equations for how do we put a spacecraft in there that would be geosynchronous and blah 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 and all this type of stuff. And it was fascinating that we know people that are working on stuff like this, because a lot of Java devs, you're just working on something that is not as exciting as that.
mhm. And again, that
So
these people are so reachable and open to talk
yes.
about their work and share with everyone what they do. I know that Sean created a few Java libraries and JavaFX libraries, which are just free, open. They live on GitHub. And anyone who wants to build something similar can do that with libraries he created.
Believe it or not, you reach out to him with a question, he'll answer you. He's easy to find.
Except at the bar on Friday night.
But
That's a different
yes,
story. So
I selected my favorite session.
okay.
Can you select one of that
Oh,
120?
wow, that's really difficult. So Vince and I are both on the CFP team, so we read, 800 or 900 different CFP entries. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to think for a second.
Do you actually have time during the conference to join sessions as the organizer?
That's a great question. I usually am able to sneak in one a day, right? So, but I'll go back and watch the videos later.
Mhm.
But I think some of the ones that I'm super interested in, especially in light of this recent interest in like AI with Chat GPT and stuff like that. Frank Greco is doing one around AI called Patterns, Predictions, and Prescriptions, which is about basically using machine learning in Java
Mhm.
to do those three things: patterns, predictions, and prescriptions. And then the other one that I'm super interested in is the one by Aaron, which I mentioned before, which is Beyond Rust and CRUD: Integration Practices and Microservices. And this is a little bit of an inside job because I was speaking to her and she was like, "What should I do a presentation on?" I said, "What I would really love to see is a presentation on how you weave together microservices, but not using just HTTP standard REST calls, using something like Apache Camel to
Mhm.
make it much more fluid and a little bit less brittle." And she was like, "I think that's a great idea." So we talked about it some more, and she came up with this great idea. And I think that's something that like I would personally use as a software developer. I think a lot of people in the audience would love to see alternatives to just doing HTTP over REST. So
That session is created for you, so you have to be there
yeah, exactly. So I was able to find a volunteer to
to
do
create
that.
it for
So
you. Yeah. And Vincent, do you have one that you have selected
well, there's
already?
Arjuna. I'm going to butcher her name.
Oh yes,
Kai
that's right.
Ruzi is going to be talking on observing Minecraft. So, it gets me behind the interface of the only way I really interact with technology, which is games. They're going to look at how into that kind of into like monitoring server health and alerting and issues on real time, as they do it for Minecraft, which is obviously not a small system. When you think about what happens behind the scenes at scale for something like a game, people think games are pretty lightweight things, and they are not. Especially when it comes to something the size of Minecraft, that'd be really interesting. But
Hmm.
I think those lessons apply to anything that you're going to do that's highly scalable and highly secure. So
Hmm.
that should be a good one. Do we have time to go to sessions? No. And people sometimes say, "Hey man, you having fun?" I'm like, I am not having fun at this conference. I do not have fun at the conference. I'm enjoying myself. Right? Don't get me
Hmm.
wrong. I love doing it and I'm enjoying myself, but it's not a fun thing for me. It's too much going on.
But actually, I never organized something so big, but isn't it the moment that the doors open when the event actually starts? There's no way back at that moment. So isn't that a
Oh, no,
flow
no.
forward?
No, there's no way back from this 6 months before. Although, so inside trick. If you want to actually even talk to me at this event, don't do it until after registration on the second day, on the first main day of the conference. So between 7 a.m. and say 10 a.m., don't even look at me. It's the most stressed that I'm going to be because everybody wants something, or it's everything, anywhere, everywhere, all at once. Is it's what that period is. After that initial flow, when everyone's come through the door and got their badge and shirt and what have you, for the most part, it's it's kind of pretty much on autopilot till we pack it up. Although there's always things to do, but yeah, there's no way back from this 6 months before because we have to sign things.
Hmm.
It is quite a bit of work leading up to the conference. We typically don't sleep much during the event. I think last year and every year, I'll go to bed at maybe 1 and get up at 5 a.m. 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. is sleep time. And then you're running on pure adrenaline for like 3 or 4 days. So, but we love doing it. So that's why we
Hmm.
keep doing it.
I really hope that you have at least 5 minutes of time to grab a cup of coffee and take a look at the event from the side and see how everyone is enjoying them and going
Oh, yeah.
from
Yeah.
session to session.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's why we do a
We do that.
video every year. We should do it again this year, Pratik. It's because
Oh, yeah.
afterwards I can go, oh yeah, that was fun.
I guess DevNexus is sold out already. No more tickets there? No. So people can still come to the Atlanta Jug afterwards. What is the mix of audience and who is coming to your jugs? Is it male 40s white, as most of these tech events?
Frank, that's a really good question. So the question is, what is the demographic for the DevNexus conference? And so Vince and I both go to various different Java-focused events around the world, right? Whether it's DevOps Belgium, Java Barcelona, JBC and Conf, et cetera, right? And I think one of the things that our speakers finds pleasantly surprising about DevNexus is that our audience is actually quite diverse compared to other conferences. And some of that is just organically, and some of that is actually by efforts by our team. So, for example, we partner with Techs of Color Atlanta and Women Who Code Atlanta to make sure that they're aware of the event. We also have a large number of scholarships that we give both those organizations so that those folks can come. And I think the other organic part is that Atlanta as a city is also very diverse. So when you're walking out onto the expo floor at lunchtime or during a break, you'll notice that compared to other Java events, there are a lot more women in the audience, right? There's a lot more persons of color, whether they're black or whether they're South Asian or whether they're Chinese Americans or whatever. You'll notice that there's actually quite a bit of diversity here compared to other events. It's something that we're always working on improving, and like I was saying, it didn't just happen by accident. It's something that we've worked on over the years, right? Similarly, if you look at the speaker lineup, you'll notice that there are a fair number of not 40-year-old men as speakers. And a lot of that is outreach that we do to specifically get those folks in different communities to submit their ideas for the conference. So it's a mixture of both, but a lot of it is the work that Vincent, myself, and the rest of the team puts into the conference in terms of having a diverse attendee and speaker base.
Yeah,
So,
which is good.
I remember a tweet from I don't know what year it was, but one of the preceding years where one of the ladies that was there said, I'll paraphrase it terribly, but he said, "This is something you don't normally see at a tech conference: a line outside the women's bathrooms." Now that,
Indeed.
demo breakdown isn't as high as we would like it to be. It's tech, right? But we do what we can to encourage it with partnering with local orgs. Well, every year we've run a Women in Technology breakfast at the event. On the this year it's on the Thursday, the second day of the main conference, and we'll I don't know what the lineup is for this year because I'm not organizing it. One of the female board members is organizing it this year. Great, even better. But last year we had Heather Van Curra, who runs the JCP, interview Elena Percival, who's the CEO and founder of Women Who Code Worldwide. So, we're very fortunate to have her come to the event and join us and participate. And this is not just for women. We want everyone to come to it, but it's the room is full. And it's I think that's super encouraging for tech conferences to see that.
And it's not a small room. It's a room that seats 400 people. So there's a lot of women at the event. I think I don't have the specific numbers for this year or the last year off the top of my head, but I know that in 2020 that we had I think somewhere between 35 to 40% women in attendance, right? Don't quote me on that because I'm not 100% certain, but it was at least 1/3 of the audience was women. So that's something that we really like to see.
That was also part of the message of the Japan Jug. They have a separate woman jug, but they really want to join. They want to have one community which is friendly for everyone, where everyone can join. And do you also see everyone returning to your jugs now post-COVID? Is everyone coming back from behind the computer, from the home desk, from working from home?
We're seeing approximately 1/3 to 1/2 of pre-COVID attendance at the Java user group. But I think the encouraging thing for us is that the attendance has slowly but surely been increasing every month. People are starting to leave their home computers, leave their house, and come back out. I think that with the recent news of the widespread layoffs in technology, I'm hoping that people will start to understand again that it's important for them to go to these local Java user group meetings. It's important for them to number one, learn something new, or even if they know it, just see a different perspective on something that they already know, as well as start doing that networking again, right? Because I know in Europe, things are different in terms of job security and stuff like that, but at least in the US, we don't have as much job security. We never did compared to Europe, right? So I'm hoping that people get this message that they need to start re-engaging with their local tech community, whether it's the local Java user group or the local web meetup or the local machine learning meetup or whatever it may be. If there's one thing from this podcast that I would like to let people know is that now's a good time to go out and start re-engaging with your local tech community, right? You don't have to be involved. You just show up at a meeting, make some friends, meet some new old friends, make some new friends, start rebuilding that network because Frank, as you know, the one thing in technology that is always constant is that technology is changing. So what you know today is not necessarily what you will need to know 2 or 5 years from now. So you always have to stay on top of things so that you're always employable and you have a great job that you like.
Yeah, and actually Arun Gupta's keynote is all about that point. It's important that people get out of the house. So in the past, people would be at work and they would leave work and come to the Java user group meeting and see a session and have pizza with us or whatever, and then go home. Now, for the most part, with the remote work, hybrid work, whatever, people will have to leave home to come to the Java user group at that worst time of day for traffic. And so many things can get in the way of that. So with the best intentions in the world, you're like, well, I want to go to the meeting tonight, and it's at 7 o'clock, so I need to leave my house at 6 or 6:30 or whatever. But guess what happens? A work call runs a little long, because that tends to happen when people are distributed. You've got to get this last email out of the door tonight. If you have kids, the kids are going crazy, dinner's burning, the dog gets out, it starts raining, or you're just like, oh, I'm tired now from this long day, I'm not going to go. That's what's happening. So, it isn't this flow of work to jug to home. Now it's like home, jug, home. And that's one of the reasons why this attendance is down from what it was. But to Pratik's point, this is a perfect time to re-engage in your community, to rekindle, a sense of why you even do this, because you don't see people that much in person anymore. You're doing this, which is fine for the mechanics of a day job. Pratik and I both worked remote for many years, so we get this, but we also get out a lot because we go to events. It's part of our job. But if that's not part of your job, it's very important that you see other people in person.
What I learned from the previous talks I had with JUG leaders is it's not only the talk, it's really the event, which is the whole combination of learning something new, learning something you didn't expect maybe, and definitely talk to other people. Even if you have a job, you're right, in Europe we're pretty sure about our job, but even here there's a war on talent. Here the companies are looking for people. We invite some people from overseas to come help us. But indeed, even if you have a job, you can always learn, you can meet new people, not maybe for a new job right now, but maybe later. So really mixing within the communities is really important.
Yeah, and I think you hit upon something very interesting there. My favorite track at almost any conference is the hallway track, right? Yes, I love going to see some great presentations and learn something new. But the hallway track where you have those discussions on, hey, I'm using this specific library to do this, or it could be something even more expansive. It's like, hey, I'm trying to learn this new thing. I saw your presentation, or just meeting a group of people who are tackling the same bug in Maven or whatever, right? That's where the real value of a lot of these events is, right? It's the hallway track where you can have those informal one-on-one or 1 to 5, 3 to 5 people discussion. That really makes a difference for me.
Thanks for joining this recording. We do this a few weeks before DevNexus because I didn't want to interfere with your schedule just right before the conference. I hope you had a good start of the conference and you can really enjoy those few very busy days and at least pick a few of these speakers and these slots. Thank you also, the listeners. Keep an eye on Foojay for future articles about development and everything related to the Java world. And next month we continue this virtual world tour in another country. We'll see which one.
Give me a Foo, give me a J, give me the friends of OpenJDK.